off day for the Cleveland Browns on Tuesday as the transition from week 1 to week 2 is now underway. Certainly some saltiness still within the fan base, and understandably so. But if you did not get to see it, there was a fantastic piece written on ESPN by Dan Moore. And some of the things that I've been saying about UL as a fan base of this franchise was picked up on by ESPN's Dan Moore. We're going to talk about that. We're certainly going to talk a little bit about the state of the team as they try to transition from teasing the fans with a winning season once every couple of years to hopefully making this a sustainable product. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. All of you that support the OBR, the written content over at theobr.com. Of course, the OBR streaming network beginning nightly at 6 p.m. Eastern. This time of year, the work comes easier. Being, all the content there at your disposal is a very, very fun thing. Only thing is we don't get to control the content. Unfortunately, sometimes some of the content has to come from the negative standpoint, but just having the game back is the best. And of course, we're already down one NFL weekend, 17 more to go. And before you know it, we're going to be sitting here looking at President's Day weekend going, where in the world did the NFL season go? But ESPN's Dan Moore, and this piece really that Dan wrote, and it's in length. So if you're still a fan of the long form, like I am, definitely something. But Dan, I kind of almost take this, almost kind of like a tribute to the Cleveland Brown fan base because I think, and I know I felt this way, and this is now my 9th season covering this team. You hear things, but the more you can get entrenched into it, and I've told this Cleveland Browns fan base for years that you would not like other fan bases. They're not, and maybe it's just because the franchise goes back for so long and nowadays people move on like from the family tree, what I'm saying, the lineage of it. You'll see a kid wearing a Lakers jersey living in New Jersey or New York, like that type of stuff. It's not really that way in Cleveland. You don't exceed from the union in Cleveland. But some thoughts here about as you kind of went into this blind and started to maybe get your eyes on and start to understand this fan base a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that sort of the initial animating question that I was batting around with my editor months ago, it was how much more can even such a historic fan base in Sportstown take? And the main thing that I learned in my time in Cleveland and talking with Cleveland Browns fans is the fan base's endurance, as it will, and its loyalty. It doesn't stem necessarily from, certainly not from, allegiance to the Haslams or anything like that. It's really intertwined with Cleveland as a place. And it feels to me, and I'm not from Cleveland. And so a lot of my experience writing and reporting on the piece was dedicated simply to learning everything I could about this very unique place and the people that live there. But Browns fandom, in a way that in very few other places is true, feels intertwined with Cleveland as a town. And, it's very much an ancestral thing, like a thing that's passed on. And I quote someone in the piece near the end of it, Scott Ninari, who is known as the godfather of the Muni lot. Many of your listeners probably know him. And he put it perfectly. He said that, people here, and he meant he swept a hand sort of gesture at the Muni lot, they're fans of the town as much as they are of the team. And I find that inspiring and super interesting and in some ways emblematic of the best of what sports can be. So I don't know. I walked away from the experience totally enamored of Cleveland as a sports town, and really very impressed with Browns fans in a way that I guess I wasn't expecting to be.
Yeah, and, like, you totally, are in lockstep on, some of the things that I learned in the infancy of, my time of covering this team. I mean, you talk about the Muni Lot. When does the star player of the city's basketball team go to the football team's tailgate and toss a keg at other kegs to knock it down? Because that's kind of what the tradition is.
Uh-huh.
And, Donovan Mitchell, yeah, man, absolutely, totally in. You know what I'm saying? Anything to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And as far as, the overall fandom, me being in New Jersey, I don't get recognized very often. But the few times I have, I mean, and it's like, oh my lord, okay, I hope I'm not in a hurry because, they are ready to talk Cleveland Browns. And if they'll go 20 minutes, they'll want to go 20 minutes. Yeah, sitting there with bagel and my butter, like, oh god, this might melt before we get home. But
Mhm.
what exactly are you supposed to do in that situation? And for me, it would happen so infrequently that I certainly enjoy it to that point. But it is just something because I think it's all kind of wrapped into one. It's the city, it's the culture, it's the people, it's the hardworking environment. And I think that's kind of where it all kind of ties in, certainly to the fandom. And I guess this would be the right transition. And this is, I think, one of the things that really set this fandom where it kind of almost came, like the Hatfields and the McCoys. You went into this one specific player transaction and nobody. There were people that said, "We like the player. We really like the player," but, the fandom, a lot of it was not willing to sell their soul, and there were people I've done content with years prior who that was enough. Just, walked away. Didn't really have a desire to do it anymore. Like, that was how much of a, significant move, I guess, negatively in the moral standpoint that, a lot of people felt. Then there was a large part of it, that I'll do anything to win. So look, I mean, they're killing me anyway. So if I'm going to sell a little of my soul along the way, and there was a lot of people that would have totally accepted it if it had gone right. And then there's it went totally wrong, went so far as wrong as, I know you mentioned it in your article. It's probably maybe most single handedly the worst transaction in the history of professional sports because with it not working out, it significantly set this franchise back. And Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and Jimmy Haslam, they all deserve their, comeuppance for making that move and it not working. But the problem is it didn't work and it went poorly so quickly that it was going to be years before they had some of the assets to fill in the holes that they were, well, they can't draft and these types of things. And well, you can't draft when your first draft pick starts in the 90s. You can't count on your draft class that year. So hopefully, with a quick foreshadowing, just off of 1 week, of course, you're starting to see some young talent here. I mean, you had a running back who was only 20 years old with a great day, a tight end who was only 21. But making such a major transaction like that, it has to pan out for you because the problem is it hurt the franchise on the field. It, hurt the roster in the future. It destroyed a good portion of this fan base. It broke a lot of the fan base's heart. They're still willing to love this team and come back to this team, but there was just so much magnitude from that not working out.
Yeah. I mean, I think you nailed it. What was, I think, uniquely damaging about the Watson move was that it turned out bad from all angles, right? Like it wasn't just on the field where it didn't pan out. It wasn't just in the future, right? Like the draft picks that you gave up, the opportunity cost of it. There was also a sense of right, kind of shame that accompanied it. Like right, it and yeah, that's what I think made it. That's what made it damaging. But one other thing I'll say is that it was also in my reporting, it it stands also as a source of division, right? Like I talked to a good many fans who basically said like, well, at least at least we took a chance. Like at least we spent some money, and at least we tried to solve our quarterback problem. And then there are the other 50% of fans who say, well, at what cost? And that division itself can be a source of corrosion for a fan base, right? And again, this was sort of my inciting curiosity, is like the Browns' competitive struggles coupled with the historic uh, nature of the Watson move and the fallout from it, coupled with other sources of division for in Cleveland for the fan base currently. It all swirled in my mind from afar. It's like, oh wow, this seems like a really kind of tense time for fans, and that's what made me. I have immense respect for Cleveland as a sports town and for Browns fans as a fan base, going because of what they've done historically. This is the 30th anniversary of when Cleveland banded together for the Save Our Browns campaign and effectively convinced the NFL and Art Modell to leave the Browns history and likeness in Cleveland when Modell moved the Browns to Baltimore. And I'm from Oakland, where we recently have lost all of our sports teams, and A's fans over the last couple of years were protesting our ownership's desire to move in much the same way as Browns fans once did. And quite frankly, we looked to Browns fans as a model. And so I have a ton of respect for Browns fans, and it was that coupled with all these different swirling factors that could have been and that have been tiring Browns fans and sort of chipping away perhaps at their morale, that said I want to go to Cleveland and see what it's like there and see how fans are doing. But again, I want to stress, after my time there, what I learned is that yes, there are many fans, most fans, who are tired. There are some who walked away because of the Watson stuff. But the vast majority of 90% of the people I talked to said yeah, we're tired, but to give up on the Browns would be tantamount to giving up on a family member or something, right? The Browns are an institution in Cleveland that is integral to Cleveland in the same way that I don't know, a grand piece of civic architecture is integral to a city, or a tradition, or a heritage. It really is more than a football team there.
Yeah, and hence the phrase that usually comes around. Some of them are back in by the draft or by training camp or preseason, and it's I'm back on my Browns BS. So even the ones that are usually the most beat up and bent up. We just got one more question. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. If you didn't read Dan Moore's piece, I got to be honest. For Browns fans, it kind of felt like hey, I didn't know who you were. It was kind of almost like I didn't respect your game. My bad.
Yeah.
So you guys might want to read it, because it's actually a pretty good testament to all of you. We mentioned this before we hit record. So for me, I started in 17. So yes, I literally signed up to cover a 1-15 team that went 0-16. So there it was, me just sitting in the beginning of this, and even my wife questioning, hey, I know you wanted to get back into this, but really, is this what you were thinking? But then came 2018. And it wasn't a playoff year, but it was Baker, it was Nick Chubb, it was Myles Garrett, it was Denzel Ward, and all of a sudden here, looked at, and then 2019, as quickly as they got up the mountain, they came crashing back down the mountain. Then 2020, and even what made 2020 so special was it was COVID, and we got to see some practices on YouTube. There were no preseason games. There were not people in it, and this team just went out and played, and this team just went out and won. And that Sunday night in Pittsburgh, that was just absolutely bananas, where the Browns basically just knocked their teeth out and stepped on their chest in the first 12 minutes of game action. That's how fast it felt like it went down. Only for 21 to have it all come crashing back down again. And now everything that was so great in 2020 fell apart. Now, the coaches, the GM, the front office, they weren't getting along with the quarterback. Meanwhile, it was like everybody was lovey-dovey, 7 months ago. And so much so that they That was it. And they, that is still the one. I have zero issue with the way this team is structured right now because I am one that wants continuity. I don't want to be keep changing. So that means you have to accept some good with some bad. I think one of the biggest mistakes they all made is that nobody could just get into a room together and make it all work out with Baker Mayfield. I think he was the guy. He wanted to be here. You've talked so many times. There's been people, so many people over the years that wanted nothing to do with this franchise. Baker Mayfield was the exact opposite. He wanted to be the face of Cleveland. Then you make the moves you do in 22. Obviously, you never had a chance because Deshaun misses 11 games. 23, actually, Deshaun's last game in 23, he looked fantastic in a win on the road in Baltimore, but all of a sudden apparently broke his shoulder in the process, which led to Flacco coming in. It was just another great Cinderella story for the Browns. But then 24 just came crashing down again. My thing, and this is what I was saying to you, is sure, everybody would like their team to win the championship, win the Super Bowl, win the NBA Finals. I think Browns fans, sure, they want to win it, but if they could just at least have a 2 to 3 year run of credibility and, or maybe, God forbid, even one playoff game in January in Cleveland, Ohio, and A, they certainly deserve it, but B, they would be the most, appreciative of it. Like, when the Steelers are spoken about, no, oh, well, they don't miss the playoffs ever. It's, Browns fans, well, what, go. Yeah, that's exactly what the response is, and rightfully so. The Browns, their fans would just like some sustainable success, and it might not even have to lead to a Lombardi.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, quite honestly, everything that I feel like you need to know about Browns fans and the passion they would summon forth in the event of consistent winning. I mean, of course, if the Browns were to go to the Super Bowl, but just if the team is competitive on the field, I mean, on Sunday in the Muni lot. I mean, first when I was there during the preseason, the Muni lot was unlike almost anything I'd ever seen in my life, and that was for a preseason game. On Sunday, there was a wedding in the Muni lot,
Brown
right?
Spider and the First
Yeah,
Lady, absolutely.
There is a fervor and enthusiasm that Browns fans marshal for the community. I mean, everyone I talked to in Cleveland expressed such love for and excitement about their fellow Clevelanders and for the town and for the rituals and experiences of rooting for the Browns together. And that kind of enthusiasm doesn't just come about on its own, right? It comes about generationally, and it requires effort. Like Scott Nunari, the godfather of the Muni Lot, has spent thousands of dollars and many years retrofitting his bus into a dog and into this massive party bus that is a center of community in the parking lot. And there's thousands of people like him who do that. My point is, Browns fans do this every year, every weekend for each other and for the community in the absence of a competitive team often. I think what you would see if the Browns were to win and win consistently and, God forbid, go to a Super Bowl is all that energy channeled to the Browns and onto the field. Several players that I spoke to at training camp kind of put it to me this way that, they mentioned, oh, remember when the Cavs won, 8 or so years ago, how excited Cleveland was, how awesome that parade was downtown, whether it was Browns execs, Browns players, or the fans, everyone had the same prediction. They're like, times that by a million. And that's what the celebration would be if the Browns won a Super Bowl. Days long parties, all that. So you're totally right. They deserve it. And I think sports fans everywhere should be rooting for that, because it would just be so cool to see a city that is so serious about its sports team be rewarded for the seriousness of that commitment. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, and just for me from doing this every single day, I look at where this team is at, and yes, this team, playoffs might not be in the cards here in 2025, But for the first time, there is a lot of youth, and there's some on the offensive side of the ball, there's some on the defensive side of the ball. And, yes, only 1 week in, all looked really promising. This team has 2 first-round picks in April. You know, that is supposed to be the draft that they can find their guy. And right now, it kind of only looks, that's the only thing they're missing is, the long-term option there. The other things can be worked out. They have draft assets. They are
Mhm.
very smart financially. And I think, they were getting so close and then, made what they thought was going to be a franchise defining acquisition. And unfortunately, it did not work. And the fact that they are all still here tells you what level they are viewed at by the franchise overall. Because in a lot of ways, yeah, probably a head or two should have rolled over that move and it not working out. And a lot of franchises would have done that. But this franchise that has always been so unstable said, you know what? If that's the way it should be done here in Cleveland, we're going to do the exact polar opposite because you know what? That has not worked. Change after change after change has not worked.
Yep.
ESPN's Dan Moore, um, certainly probably something that, was a little bit more, in the heart here for Dan is, he kind of got to see this type of thing, from where, his location is and got to, kind of go experience a similar situation through a different fan base's eyes. And, again, one of the reasons this piece spoke to me is I told you guys that I kind of felt like, it was words that I have felt about this franchise and this fan base since I've, been here doing it. You guys are not like others. You are not, I, in New Jersey, I used to hear people, oh, well, Eli Manning sucks. What? Eli Manning sucks. Okay, sure, no problem. 2 Super Bowls, this, that, the other thing. And the people just wouldn't come off of that. Browns fans want to talk ball. They just absolutely want to talk about their franchise and whether the team was 1-15 or it was a season like 20 or it was a season like 2023 where they went to the playoffs. So big thanks, obviously, to Dan coming on here. We'll be back on the practice field tomorrow, which means we will back to business. Raven week begins. Ironically enough, the 30th anniversary. They had to do it this week. Really, Baltimore, you had to do it this week. So obviously, Browns fans are going to be even more aggravated to see the Ravens this week. But as much as it hurt Sunday afternoon for the Browns fans, I'm sure at about 11:45 Sunday night, Browns fans were definitely smiling ear to ear with a 16-point turnaround up in Orchard Park, New York. This has been Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. We appreciate you all for tuning in, and we will be